everyone, I'm Maria McLachlan and this is video number 8 in my series about awful arguments by trans activists. And today I want to deal with the tactic of labelling those of us who challenge gender ideology right-wing. The first and most important lesson that anyone who wants to think critically can learn is that an argument stands or falls on its own merit, regardless of who makes it. That should be obvious, but it's amazing how often people will let the fact of who makes an argument stand in the way of considering whether the argument itself is any good or not. I'm sure many people watching this will be familiar with a certain broadcaster called Piers Morgan behaving in a rather disagreeable way on TV.
Well, I'm 2 feet away from 3 of the dimmest people in Britain.
Lots of people think he's a complete arse, but does that mean that everything Piers Morgan says is stupid and wrong? I'd wager that if we all looked at a few dozen comments that Morgan has made on controversial issues, we'd all find some that we agree with and others that we don't. And talking of arses, it was great to see Morgan handing the dreadful Benjamin Butterworth, I believe he's an editor at Pink News, his arse to him on a plate recently over the furore about J.K. Rowling's latest book. I'm sure lots of people were wondering if hell was freezing over as they found themselves cheering Morgan on. Links below as usual, by the way. So if we were to just dismiss everything Piers Morgan says just because it's Piers Morgan saying it, that would be the genetic fallacy. When you decide whether an argument is good or bad, right or wrong, not on its merits, but on its source. A classic example of the genetic fallacy is based on the premise that Hitler was a vegetarian. This is sometimes disputed, so I did a bit of research, and it seems that only in the last 6 or 7 years of his life did he strive, largely but not always successfully, to eat a meat-free diet, but he was very committed to the idea of vegetarianism. So if Hitler, a man generally agreed not to have been a very nice bloke, was a vegetarian, then being vegetarian really isn't a good thing. In fact, if you're a vegetarian, you're as bad as Hitler. And actually, the Third Reich did put into effect a number of animal welfare measures during the 1930s. Take vivisection, for example. They passed laws against experimenting on live animals, though they had no qualms about carrying out experiments on live human beings. But if you're opposed to vivisection, then sorry, you're in bed with the Nazis. Indeed, if you are against animal cruelty generally, congratulations, you are aligned with the far-right British National Party. That is a lovely picture from the BNP website. Right, obviously, this is an incredibly silly argument, and unless you're a complete moron, you'll be able to spot how preposterous it is at a glance. The fact that an evil, mass-murdering tyrant was a vegetarian or anti-vivisection has no bearing whatsoever on how ethical or otherwise vegetarianism and vivisection are. Yet this is, in effect, the very same argument that is made by many gender fanatics whose hatred and lack of human decency allows them to call feminists and our allies Nazis. Or white supremacists or whatever. Most don't go into as much detail as this guy. I mean, it just beggars belief. TERFs are by no means distinguishable than any other rabid hate group. They're indistinguishable from Nazis because they push the same ideas, the same rhetoric, the same lies, the same violence. Let's just remind ourselves of a few things the Nazis did, and I'm lifting this list straight from my own blog because I've written about this on there. attempted genocide of Jews and Gypsies, mass murders of other civilian populations in many places in Europe, forcible medical experiments on adults and children, euthanasia of physically or mentally impaired children, forcible sterilization of those with hereditary conditions, persecution of homosexuals with thousands of gay men sent to concentration camps. That list isn't meant to be exhaustive. Now let's look at what gender-critical feminists believe. A woman is an adult human female, a man is an adult human male. It's quite likely that Nazis do agree with this because most people do. But apart from that, I really can't see any common ground. So to be fair, this comparison with Nazis is nonsense. It's born out of pure blind hatred and a desperation to try to plant the idea that women fighting to hold on to the definition of the word woman and the sex-based rights and protections that go with it are the same as Aryan supremacist genocidal maniacs. Certainly it isn't worth engaging with anyone who sinks to this. They're just trolls. Now, there is another fallacy that comes into play here: guilt by association. If, for example, a member of your family is a convicted criminal, it would be absolutely wrong for people to assume that you also have criminal tendencies, that your word can't be trusted just because you're related to him. And let's be honest, it's statistically far more likely to be him. I have been accused of making alliances with the right wing because on my website pages about political stories, I do carry links to articles by conservatives. Now check this tweet. Before Skepticat UK, that was my Twitter name, can fire off a disclaimer, here are the links to the religious right from her own website. What really annoyed me about this tweet is the suggestion that I would fire off a disclaimer. Why would I do that? The page is called The Political Spectrum, and on it I carry links to articles not only by or about conservatives, but also socialists, liberals, Greens, nationalists, and I'm never accused of aligning with any of them. In fact, I will link to stories and articles about anyone on the democratic spectrum of political views if I think they may be of interest to visitors to my website. Now, feminists were accused of working with the right wing when some of them spoke on a panel at a meeting hosted by the Heritage Foundation early in 2019. The Heritage Foundation is an American conservative think tank. On its YouTube channel, it carries hundreds of videos about every political issue under the sun. I've looked at a few of them, and they are, in my opinion, absolutely awful. Rabidly right-wing, amongst other things. So why would any feminist agree to speak at a meeting hosted by them? Well, I can think of two main reasons why they might have done in this case. One is the fact that these feminists were cancelled by liberal and left of centre groups in the US, which is shameful. Nobody else would give them a platform. Secondly, the Heritage Foundation is said to be one of the most influential think tanks, not only in America, but in the world. Those women and one detransitioned man have something important to say, and this was an opportunity to say it in a place where it would be heard by many and hopefully generate a great deal of publicity and discussion. Does the fact that they spoke at a meeting on gender identity hosted by the Heritage Foundation mean that they agree with its politics, that they endorse its policies on everything from abortion to climate change and COVID-19? No. If you use that as an excuse to dismiss those speakers or refuse to listen to them or call them right-wing, that is fallacious reasoning, guilt by association. The only way to decide whether they have something of value to say is to listen to them actually saying it wherever they are. By the way, I have to laugh when I see comments like this one. Find me a right-winger that supports trans rights. The vast majority are left-wing. And he goes on to mansplain who can be a feminist. Well, that was tweeted on 3rd of January 2019. I wonder if there were any transgender-related stories in the news that day. Oh, here's one. Maria Miller, one of a series of Tory cabinet ministers who championed gender self-identification and reforming gender law to that end. There was also Nicky Morgan, Amber Rudd, Penny Mordaunt, Justin Greening, oh, and this woman. Not only right-wing, but some quite powerful right-wingers do support gender self-identification. Thankfully, the current right-wing Tory cabinet doesn't, and so it's off the table for the foreseeable future. So, what is it about gender-critical views that could make them right-wing? The answer is nothing. There is nothing inherently right-wing about insisting that biology trumps subjective gender identity, and there is nothing left-wing about saying the opposite. It isn't a right-left division, and as I've said many times before, gender is regressive. Gender is a straitjacket, and it should be challenged, not reinforced, which is what gender ideology does. The blog post I referred to earlier about the Nazi atrocities was inspired by the fact that some trans activists were tweeting a photo of a flyer stuck to something by the National Front, a British fascist group that I thought had disappeared decades earlier. And it said, "Don't be a gender offender. Support the traditional family." And it shows an outline image of a traditional nuclear family with the man as the dominant figure. It was tweeted by this idiot saying TERFs and the NF are in alignment. How? Remember, these people say TERF isn't a slur, it's just an acronym for trans-exclusionary radical feminist. Do they seriously think that radical feminists are all gender-conforming women, heterosexual women who dream of traditional marriage and motherhood? That tweet was retweeted by many, including transgender actor Annie Wallace. Anyone surprised at this? He does have a surprisingly high voice. Surprised at the dishonesty of the original tweeter? Nope. Surprised at the utter stupidity of people like you, Annie Wallace, who apparently took it at face value? Not in the slightest. That is absolutely typical of your mindless cult. What I was a bit surprised at the time was this unconscionable response by sociologist Dr. Tracy Jensen, who I had written about before in a blog post called The Aunt Lydias of Academia. She is one of them. We shall know them by the company they keep, I guess. Shame on you, woman. So let's just have a look at what similarities there are, if any, between the typical right-wing view and the typical gender-critical view. Because venerating the traditional heterosexual nuclear family and disdaining any other way of living certainly isn't one of them. So biological sex is real, binary, and immutable. The words men and women refer to adult human males and females. Gender roles in the family and in society depend on one's biological sex. But the fundamental difference between conservative thinkers and feminists is whether those roles are natural and innate or whether they are externally imposed. The traditional conservative view is that gender roles and expression are innate and natural and arise from being born either male or female. Ideally, men are masculine, women are feminine. while the gender critical view is that gender roles and expressions are socially constructed and culturally imposed depending on sex. And this is not to say, by the way, that the brain is a blank slate and that observed average differences between male and female humans in terms of their personal attributes is all down to conditioning and socialization. I'm not going to go there now. I want to stick to views about gender expression and the expectations placed on us. The right-wing view promoted by those NF flyers is that gender roles should be accepted and those who fulfill them applauded. Men should be masculine. Women should be feminine. The gender critical view is that gender roles should be challenged, gender nonconformity accepted and embraced. There's nothing wrong with being a feminine man or a masculine woman. The accusation that gender critics, gender abolitionists are right-wing depends on misrepresenting our views and on fallacious reasoning. And the reason they resort to misrepresentation and fallacies is, again, because gender ideologues don't have sound and coherent arguments. And it would be funny if it weren't so sinister that we are the ones called fascists and bigots and Nazis. I mean, look at this one by the absolute nutter Emily Gorsensky, when it's trans activists and their allies who are policing language, deplatforming, trying to silence those who challenge them, fabricating statistics, promoting violence, turning up to feminist meetings, not to come in and engage, but to stand outside trying to intimidate attendees and drown out speakers, trying to ban books and even burning books. This is transactivism and there is nothing progressive about it. That's all for now. Thanks for watching. Bye.